The galaxy's brightest minds had gathered for what was promised to be the most mind-bending competition in history. It wasn't just a test of intellect. It was a battle for supremacy, where the winner would earn the title of most intelligent species in the universe. And at the center of it all, under the glare of 1,000 curious eyes, stood a human, a solitary figure with only a pencil and a piece of paper. The challenge was simple, yet cruel in its complexity. Each competitor was tasked with solving a series of puzzles that would stump even the most advanced artificial intelligences. The alien races represented here weren't just the smartest in their respective galaxies. They were the very definition of intellect, boasting supercomputers with processing speeds that far exceeded the limits of human comprehension. For them, problem-solving was a matter of milliseconds, of numbers and calculations in the blink of an eye. And yet, there he was, John, a human, stepping forward with nothing but his mind and the traditional tools of his species, pen and paper. The other competitors sneered. To them it was laughable. How could this primitive being hope to compete with the likes of the Zypherians, whose neural networks were integrated directly into their biology, or the Syntherians, whose minds were merged with quantum processors? These aliens had long left organic thought behind, relying entirely on machine calculations and limitless data. They were the future, the inevitable evolution of intelligence. Humanity, in their eyes, was nothing more than a relic, a dying species whose best days were far behind them. John, however, seemed unfazed. He stood tall, eyes focused on the massive projection screen in front of him. It flickered once, then displayed the first challenge, a multidimensional math problem that required rapid calculations across multiple variables. It was the kind of problem that would take even the most powerful supercomputer minutes to compute, and even then, there was no guarantee the machine would find the correct answer. A soft chuckle echoed from the Zypherian delegation. "This should be interesting," one of them muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. John didn't look up. He simply set his pen to the paper and began to write. The clock began its countdown, ticking louder with each passing second. The aliens rushed to activate their supercomputers, their eyes flashing with anticipation. The air hummed with energy as millions of calculations were processed simultaneously. Each alien race's machine worked tirelessly, pushing their processors to the limit. Meanwhile, John was a picture of calm. His hand moved slowly across the paper, scribbling down variables and equations with methodical precision. His face was impassive, but his mind was working at lightning speed. He didn't need a machine to think for him. He had something far more powerful: intuition, creativity, and the raw, unfiltered ability to think outside the box. Something no supercomputer, no matter how advanced, could replicate. The room fell silent as the clock ticked down. The alien machines were nearly finished. The Zypherians were the first to submit their results, followed closely by the Syntherians. Their digital screens flashed green, signaling that the calculations were complete. Their confidence was palpable. This was supposed to be their victory, their moment of glory. John wasn't even halfway done. The final seconds ticked away, and John wrote down his last few steps. The supercomputers had completed their work in mere moments, but John had taken his time, methodically ensuring every calculation was correct. When the timer reached 0, he set his pen down and leaned back in his chair. The aliens had no idea what they were up against. With a final flourish, the first round had begun. The clock started ticking, and the tension in the air was palpable. The alien competitors' supercomputers roared to life, their processing cores whirring with unprecedented speed. Their digital screens flashed with a stream of numbers and equations, racing through simulations faster than the human eye could follow. The galaxy's most intelligent beings, races whose entire existence had been shaped by technology, were primed to crush the lone human in this first challenge. But John remained unfazed. He took a deep breath and glanced at the problem on the screen. It was a challenge unlike any other, a complex, multi-layered puzzle that would require not only rapid problem-solving, but also an intuitive understanding of mathematical concepts that transcended simple calculations. The aliens were confident they would win. After all, they had supercomputers capable of processing billions of possibilities in an instant. Machines that could calculate the most intricate of equations with flawless accuracy. John's method, however, was simple. He picked up his pencil, stared at the blank sheet of paper in front of him, and began to write. He didn't need fancy equipment or an advanced neural network. His mind was his only tool, and he trusted it completely. As the other competitors' machines clattered away, solving the problem step by step, John approached the puzzle from a different angle. His pencil moved slowly, deliberately, across the paper as he worked through the layers of complexity. Each stroke was a calculated step forward. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. The Zypherians, who had integrated their minds with quantum processors, watched with disdain. Their leader, a towering being whose skin shimmered with 1,000 patterns, scoffed. "It's almost charming, isn't it? Watching a human try to keep up with the future." Next to them, the Syntherians, their bodies entirely synthetic, exchanged knowing looks. Their minds were connected to supercomputers, able to run multiple simulations simultaneously, all while factoring in variables that would make a human head spin. Their calculations were flawless, predictive, precise. And yet, they still looked down at the human contestant, amused by his primitive methods. As the seconds ticked away, the supercomputers began to produce results. The Zypherians were the first to submit their calculations. The Syntherians followed shortly after. Both races confidently displayed their solutions on the central screen, flashing bright green, indicating that they had completed the task. John, however, had not yet finished. He was still deep in thought, working through the steps. To the others, it seemed impossible that he could possibly be on the same level. But they underestimated him. When the timer reached its final seconds, John made his last mark on the paper. His answer, though written in a series of simple numbers and equations, was elegant. It was not just the right answer, it was the most refined solution, the one that accounted for nuances the supercomputers had missed. As the final moments passed, the results were displayed for all to see. The alien competitors' screens glowed green, confirming that they had completed their calculations. But when John's answer appeared on the display, the room fell silent. It wasn't just correct, it was better, more efficient. A solution so beautiful in its simplicity that even the most advanced supercomputers couldn't have predicted it. The Zypherians' smirks faltered. The Syntherians blinked, stunned into silence. And the human? John simply put his pencil down and smiled. This was just the beginning. The next challenge was unveiled, and it was unlike anything any of the competitors had expected. It was not a puzzle of numbers, equations, or abstract logic. This test would be one of language, a cryptic alien dialect that had baffled even the galaxy's most advanced linguists for centuries. The task was simple: decipher the code, reveal its meaning, and translate it into a known language. But the complexity of the script, with its alien symbols and intricate grammar, was enough to make even the most sophisticated translation software falter. The aliens, accustomed to relying on their hyper-advanced technology, wasted no time in accessing their linguistic databases. John, however, did not need a supercomputer to decipher the symbols. He had something far more powerful: his understanding of language itself. As the challenge was announced, the room filled with the hum of alien machinery. The Zypherians plugged into their quantum processors, the Syntherians activated their Neuralink systems, and the others fired up their high-speed translation software, all eager to see who would solve the code first. John simply sat back in his chair and focused. The cryptic symbols danced across the screen in front of him, alien and alienating. To the others, they were nothing but a random assortment of characters. To John, they were a puzzle waiting to be solved. He began to look for patterns in the arrangement of the symbols, repeated sequences, character pairings, the telltale signs of syntax and structure. Language was more than just words. It was a system of meaning, a way for minds to communicate ideas, and John's mind was uniquely attuned to it. The Zypherians were the first to react, their supercomputers running millions of possible translations in mere seconds. Their minds, linked directly to the quantum processors, were processing the symbols at a staggering rate. The Syntherians were not far behind, their advanced algorithms generating translation possibilities with flawless precision. They worked in harmony with their machines, their neural implants pulling up historical data and analyzing the symbols against every known language in their vast databases. John, on the other hand, had no such advantages. His mind had no neural implants, no supercomputer to assist him. He had only his knowledge of linguistics, his intuition, and his ability to think creatively. As the symbols appeared on the screen, he immediately began to hypothesize the structure of the language. The script, though alien in appearance, had a rhythm to it, a cadence that suggested it was more than just random characters. He could feel the meaning behind it, the way it was meant to convey thought. The repetition of certain symbols indicated they might be common words, perhaps articles or conjunctions. He saw that certain characters were clustered together more often, hinting at prefixes or suffixes. As the aliens worked at breakneck speeds, their supercomputers generating thousands of possible translations, John took a different approach. He began writing notes on his paper, sketching out the symbols and correlating them with what he understood about human languages. He looked for connections between the symbols and the meanings they could represent, the ways in which different sounds and structures could fit into the puzzle. The Zypherians' first batch of translations flashed across the screen, a series of incoherent sentences, strings of words that made no sense. Their computers hummed with frustration. The Syntherians' algorithms came next, their translations even more elaborate, but still, something didn't feel quite right. Their machines were trying to fit the symbols into existing linguistic models, applying patterns they had learned from thousands of known languages. But the structure of this language was foreign, so alien that it defied their calculations. John, still scribbling on his paper, smiled to himself. He had already deciphered the first few symbols, and he was beginning to see the broader pattern. It wasn't about brute force. It was about understanding the intent behind the symbols. He could feel the meaning starting to emerge, like the first few notes of a melody finally coming together in harmony. With only minutes left on the clock, John made his final translations, carefully converting the symbols into a coherent message. He looked up satisfied. He wasn't just going to solve the puzzle. He was going to reveal something the supercomputers couldn't. His answer was more than a direct translation. It captured the essence of the language, its nuances, its rhythm. It was a deeper understanding of the alien culture, something that no machine could replicate. As the time ran out, the alien competitors looked up, eager to submit their results. The Zypherians, the Syntherians, they all had their translations ready. But when John's solution was displayed, the room fell into stunned silence. His translation wasn't just accurate, it was flawless. The aliens had missed the most important detail, the cultural context embedded within the language. John had understood what the machines could not. The Zypherian screens flickered as their results were displayed. They had misinterpreted the meaning of key symbols, and their translation was incomprehensible. The Syntherians' algorithm had also failed to grasp the deeper meaning of the text. John's translation, however, revealed the full message, its elegance and simplicity apparent to all who could see it. It was not just a linguistic achievement, it was a triumph of human intuition over machine calculation. For the first time in the competition, the alien competitors were speechless. And John, as always, remained calm, his mind already moving on to the next challenge. The final challenge was unlike any of the others. The alien competitors had already shown their immense prowess in mathematics and linguistics, but now they faced a trial that tested not just intellect, but strategy, an intergalactic simulation of resource management, warfare, and tactical decision-making. The stakes were high, and the aliens were confident they would emerge victorious. Their supercomputers, capable of simulating millions of potential outcomes in an instant, had never failed them before. But this time, the challenge was different. It required more than just numbers. It required understanding of human nature, psychological warfare, and adaptability. The simulation would be a battle for control of an asteroid field, valuable for its rare resources. Each competitor was given limited resources: ships, personnel, and fuel. They would have to plan their moves carefully, anticipating the actions of their opponents while managing their limited resources. The complexity of the simulation was staggering, but the aliens had one clear advantage: their supercomputers. The Zypherians were the first to input their strategies, their machines churning out hundreds of thousands of possibilities within seconds. The Syntherians followed, their advanced algorithms running simulations of every possible scenario, taking into account every variable, from terrain to enemy movements. John, however, did not have a supercomputer. He had nothing more than his mind and a simple piece of paper. As the simulation began, the aliens immediately began executing their plans with ruthless efficiency, moving their ships into optimal positions and attacking with calculated precision. The Zypherians' quantum processors predicted every move with uncanny accuracy, while the Syntherians' simulations allowed them to track every resource, every ship, every piece of the puzzle. They were playing a game of pure numbers and logic, each move based on the hard data their machines provided. John, on the other hand, took a different approach. He wasn't interested in just the numbers. He knew the value of unpredictability. The key to winning wasn't to play the game as it was designed, but to outsmart the algorithm, to force the aliens into a situation where their perfect calculations would break down. He began to think in terms of human psychology, of the mistakes people made when they were under pressure. He knew that no machine could predict the unexpected, a human's ability to improvise, to think outside the constraints of data. While the aliens executed their flawless plans, John carefully charted his moves. He didn't rush. He thought several steps ahead, not just in terms of resources, but in terms of what his opponents might expect him to do. His strategy was built on misdirection, making his enemies believe he was weaker than he was, while secretly positioning himself for a decisive strike. He sent his ships in one direction, feigning weakness, then suddenly changed course, catching the aliens off guard. They were so focused on the numbers, so obsessed with their simulations, that they didn't see the trap until it was too late. The first move came from the Zypherians. Confident in their superiority, they launched a powerful offensive, sending waves of ships toward John's perceived weak point. They expected him to retreat, to scramble to defend himself. But John had anticipated this move. Instead of running, he ambushed them from a hidden position, using the asteroid field's terrain to his advantage. The Zypherians were forced into a defensive position, their flawless calculations rendered useless by the unpredictability of human strategy. Next came the Syntherians. They had watched the Zypherians' mistake and were more cautious, but still overly reliant on their simulations. They moved to take control of the most resource-rich areas of the field, but John had already set a trap. He allowed them to take the resources, knowing they would be distracted by the short-term gain. While they were preoccupied, John launched a surprise attack, targeting their fuel reserves. With their fuel supply cut off, the Syntherians were crippled, their machines unable to predict the sudden shift in momentum. As the simulation neared its end, the aliens began to realize the unthinkable. They were losing. Despite their advanced technology, their supercomputers, and their flawless logic, they had been outmaneuvered by a human. John had not just won by using brute force or raw numbers. He had won by exploiting the one thing no machine could account for: human ingenuity. The clock ticked down to the final seconds, and the simulation ended. The results flashed on the screen. The Zypherians and the Syntherians had both failed to secure the asteroid field, their strategies collapsing under the pressure of human unpredictability. But John had succeeded. His strategy had been brilliant, efficient, and devastatingly effective. He had outwitted the machines, proving once again that there was more to intelligence than just raw processing power. As the room fell silent, the alien competitors exchanged uneasy glances. They had underestimated humanity at every turn, and now they were faced with the undeniable truth. A human, with nothing but a pencil and paper, had defeated them all. John remained calm, his mind already racing ahead, ready for whatever challenge would come next. The aliens were still reeling from the shock of his victory, but John knew this was only the beginning. The final verdict was delivered, and the galaxy was stunned. For the first time in the history of intergalactic competitions, a human had bested the greatest minds of the universe. John's victory was not just a triumph of intellect. It was a testament to the power of human intuition, creativity, and adaptability. The Xipherians, the Syntherians, and the other advanced species stood in stunned silence, their minds reeling from the unthinkable. How had a single human, armed with nothing but a pen and paper, managed to defeat their supercomputers, their advanced algorithms, their centuries of technological progress? John stood at the center of the arena, the weight of his victory settling in. He hadn't just won a competition. He had shattered the perception of what it meant to be intelligent. The aliens had relied on their machines, their data, and their simulations, convinced that their superiority lay in the raw power of their technology. They had never anticipated that a human, without the aid of supercomputers or neural implants, could outthink them all. Yet, here he was, calm and composed, as if this victory were merely another day in the life of a scientist or strategist. The Xipherians were the first to recover. Their leader, a towering figure whose body shimmered with iridescent colors, stepped forward, his voice echoing in the quiet arena. "This cannot be," he said, his tone low, but filled with genuine astonishment. "You defeated us with nothing more than a pencil? Explain how this is possible." John met his gaze without hesitation. "It's simple. You relied on your machines to think for you. You were so focused on the numbers, the calculations, that you forgot one key thing: creativity. The human mind can think beyond data. We don't just follow logic, we question it. We think outside the box, adapt to the unexpected. Machines can process information faster, but they can't innovate." The other aliens exchanged glances, some still skeptical, others intrigued. They had been so certain of their superiority, so certain that their technological advances had put them leagues ahead of humanity. But now they were beginning to understand. John's victory wasn't a fluke. It was a reminder of something that no supercomputer could replicate: the human spirit. The Syntherians, their synthetic bodies gleaming with chrome and circuitry, stood in a huddle. They had been particularly confident in their victory, their minds linked directly to quantum processors. Their algorithms had been perfect until John had thrown them off balance. One of the Syntherian leaders, a sleek being with glowing blue eyes, spoke up. "You've shown us something we never considered," he said, his voice tinged with respect. "Perhaps our reliance on machines has blinded us to the true nature of intelligence." John gave a slight nod. Intelligence isn't about how much data you can process or how quickly you can compute numbers. It's about adaptability, about being able to think in ways that are not limited by preset algorithms. Machines may be powerful, but they lack the unpredictability that makes humans unique. The room fell silent as the aliens absorbed his words. They had come to this competition with one mindset: to prove that their species, their technology, was the future of intelligence. But now, faced with the undeniable truth of John's victory, they were forced to reconsider everything they had known about intelligence, about creativity, and about humanity itself. As John stood there, the weight of the galaxy's attention on him, he realized that this victory wasn't just his own. It was a victory for humanity, a reminder that no matter how advanced the technology, no matter how powerful the machines, the human mind would always find a way to rise above. In the end, it wasn't the machines that had won, it was the human spirit. And in that moment, the galaxy understood what humanity had always known. Intelligence could not be measured by data alone. It was something more. It was the very essence of what made humanity unique. John turned to face the audience, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. The aliens might have underestimated him, but they had learned an invaluable lesson. The day had been won not by machines, but by the one thing no supercomputer could ever replicate: the power of the human mind. The aftermath of John's victory was a whirlwind of stunned silence, disbelief, and reluctant admiration. The alien competitors had spent years, centuries, in some cases, perfecting their technology, building their civilizations around the belief that intelligence was a matter of processing power. Machines, algorithms, and neural-linked supercomputers were their answers to everything, and they had never imagined a day when a human, armed with nothing more than basic tools, would expose the limitations of their advanced technology. The galaxy's greatest minds now stood in awe of the very thing they had once dismissed as primitive: the human mind. As the competition came to an end, the alien leaders gathered in a separate chamber to discuss the outcome. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension. The Zypherians, whose quantum processors had once been hailed as the pinnacle of intelligence, now found themselves questioning everything they had believed in. The Syntherians, so proud of their synthetic bodies and the seamless integration of machine and mind, were forced to confront their own limitations. Even the leaders of the other species, who had participated with cool detachment, could not shake the nagging realization that something fundamental had shifted. Meanwhile, John stood in the center of the arena, reflecting on what had just transpired. He had not only defeated the most advanced minds in the galaxy, but had done so in a way that no one, least of all the aliens, had expected. The victory was not a fluke. It was the result of everything that made humanity unique: creativity, adaptability, and the ability to think beyond the boundaries of data. He had proven that intelligence was not solely about computation and logic. It was about the human capacity for intuition, improvisation, and unstructured thought. It was about the ability to innovate in ways no machine ever could. As John prepared to leave the arena, a figure approached him from the shadows. It was the Zypherian leader, his shimmering body flickering in the dim light. The alien had been one of the most vocal critics of humanity's place in the galactic order. His species had long considered themselves the intellectual elite, far beyond the reach of lesser beings. But now, after John's triumph, the Zypherian's confidence was shaken. "You are an enigma," the Zypherian said, his voice measured, though tinged with both admiration and uncertainty. "We have never seen anything like you. A human, without the aid of machines, defeating us all. You've proven us wrong, but there is still much we don't understand. Tell me, how do you do it? How do you think the way you do?" John paused for a moment, considering the question. He had no desire to boast, nor did he have an easy answer. It wasn't as if he had consciously set out to prove anything. He had simply relied on what he had always known to be true: that there was more to intelligence than just numbers and machines. "It's not about the tools you use," John replied, his voice calm but firm. "It's about the way you use your mind. Machines can process data, but they can't understand the world the way we do. They don't have experience, intuition, or the ability to think in the abstract. They operate within the confines of their programming. Humans, on the other hand, can break those constraints. We can see connections that aren't immediately obvious. We can improvise. And sometimes that's all it takes." The Zypherian leader stared at John for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. There was no denying the truth of what the human had said. The very nature of their intelligence, based solely on data, had prevented them from seeing the bigger picture. It was a humbling realization, one that would take time for the Zypherians to fully grasp. As the Zypherian leader turned to leave, he offered a final thought. You may have won this challenge, human, but we will not forget your victory. We will learn from it, and we will adapt. Perhaps we were wrong to rely solely on our machines. Perhaps there is more to intelligence than we ever thought possible. John nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's all anyone can do, adapt. The key to survival to progress is the ability to evolve. Whether it's a species, a machine, or a mind. With that, the Xipherian departed, leaving John to reflect on what had transpired. He had come to this competition not expecting to change the galaxy, but now he realized that his victory had done just that. He had not just won a contest of intellect. He had forced the galaxy's greatest minds to reconsider what it meant to be truly intelligent. Machines might have their place, but it was the human mind, imperfect, unpredictable, and endlessly creative, that had emerged as the ultimate victor. As John left the arena, he felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a deep understanding of the responsibility that came with his victory. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of, and the future had suddenly become much more uncertain for those who had once considered themselves the unquestioned leaders of intelligence. John had proven that sometimes the greatest strength was not in what you had, but in how you used what you had. And humanity, with all its imperfections, had shown the galaxy that it had something that no machine could ever replace: the power of the human mind.